Peculiar 80s nostalgia has taken over our screens the last few years, permeating our films and TV shows and occasionally even sneaking into our video games and books too. But for all the fondness towards and aping of 80s media in recent memory, particularly in cinema, some of the deeply ingrained flaws of those movies are often forgot. This isn't a bad thing, but it's a strange phenomena to see a style of movie venerated and recreated, divorced from its original ideology. These are films awash with unnecessary one-dimensional adversaries that exist solely to be punished, rampant unquestioned materialism, a reinforcement of self-identification through an isolating pack mentality, and characters that on the surface come of age though in reality revel in childhood to the point of not really standing for anything. This is all to say nothing of the obvious racial and sexual politics of a great number of these films, but at this point honestly, does it even warrant bringing up?
The Donga need food!
I apologise for the noxious Debbie Downer rays I am violently radiating right now, I know, but these are all things that have been, in my opinion, rightly left behind. No matter what your view on that is though, the shadow of this kind of ideology is deeply ingrained in and looms large over projects that in many ways simply just want to recreate an aesthetic. By no means do I wish to judge these properties for this, or poo-poo anyone for enjoying them. To me, it's simply a strange observation. All this rambling is to preface my thoughts on the 2017 film Brigsby Bear. Brigsby Bear is, in many ways, the complete opposite of this kind of movie. It's a film about finding common ground, about self-discovery through art, about growing up, about finding compassion and benevolence in your adversaries. Brigsby Bear is about the singular, unique form of millennial optimism. The film follows James, who was kidnapped as a boy and raised by two weirdos in a bunker. For most of his life, his only entertainment was an old, cheesy TV show called Brigsby Bear. When he's finally rescued, he's sent to live with his real parents, and has a great deal of trouble adapting to the real world. Unable to make sense of things, and dismayed his favourite show never got a true ending, he sets out to make one himself. And if that summary is all you know about the movie, yeah, it is kind of a hard sell. So, how does the movie keep its head up despite all that? In my opinion, it's through its excellently written and realised characters. Early on in the film, James decides to head to a party with his biological sister. On first viewing, this seemed like a terrible idea, and I found myself dreading the event, picturing everything that could possibly go wrong and every social cue James could misunderstand. When he gets there though, he just meets people. The teens seem to cotton on pretty quick that James is out of his element, and rather than making him a target, it simply makes him consideration. Not too long after arriving, James meets Spencer, a popular guy who everyone seems to know. Although at first things are a little awkward, Spencer puts in the effort and before long finds common ground with James. He even goes out of his way to make sure he mingles with people who will accept him.
Hey man, everything good?
Yeah, just meeting some new people.
Oh, dude, yeah, I don't even know who those guys are. I mean, they look like dicks, so, right? Don't worry about them.
Did Spencer really think those guys were assholes? Probably not. It's his party after all. He did think they maybe wouldn't get James though. I love that these teens aren't just naive either. Anytime James makes something difficult or demonstrates he doesn't understand something, they laugh it off and navigate around it, never really judging James for it. Absent is the confrontational tribalism we expect from on-screen teenagers. Absent is the apathetic lens through which countless NBC comedies view millennials. It's hard to really describe just how much of a relief it is to see James having a good time here. There's a spirit of inclusion and acceptance that runs deep in this movie, and it's something I feel only really makes sense given the age of the characters. When James tells his friends he wants to make a Brigsby Bear movie, there isn't a scene where he has to convince them or explain himself. There isn't a scene where they talk about him and his crazy idea behind his back. They say sure, and do what they can to help. I can't really see the film playing out in that exact way, say, 35 years ago, though that may seem an obvious point to make. Millennials have kind of had it rough, with both the portrayal in the media and the entertainment industry's attitude towards them in general. I mean, just look at all of these articles reveling in the fact that an otherwise inextraordinary and completely by-the-numbers TV sitcom isn't enjoyed by a certain demographic of people. And by no means is this a unique phenomenon. Whatever makes any new generation distinctly different is often exaggerated and cartoonified by the powers that be in the media at the time. It's a knee-jerk reaction that both caters to older audiences in the same boat and also reflects a fear of irrelevancy as well as a fear of not being able to keep up with a new market. This is especially tough now, I think, because millennials are the most media and tech-savvy generation to date. The amplification of their perceived failures and flaws is echoed and heard louder, perhaps more than any other generation before.
But you nonetheless are, without a doubt, a member of the worst generation ever.
I say this because Brigsby Bear seems to embrace what it likes about young people of today. There's an acceptance, inclusiveness, and willingness to forgive that characterizes each of James's new friends. In a sweet little scene, James talks to a girl he drunkenly hooked up with at a party, not really familiar with the social etiquette of the situation. She's reassuring and polite about it and takes it all in good humour. She isn't ostracized for hooking up with a weirdo or chastised for taking advantage of James. He's naive, but he's not mentally challenged in any way, which is also a refreshing thing for the characters to all be aware of. After this dialogue, they just move on. This isn't revolutionary writing by any means, but time and time again, whilst watching the film, I couldn't help but imagine the easier, more cynical version of events we could have gotten. One with boogeyman-esque jocks, vapid cool kids, a reinforcement of lame, clique cultures where the only people that accept James are nerds. This isn't to say that these kinds of tropes have no place in storytelling, just that they've become the de facto norm in this kind of narrative, that we forget there's a plethora of teenage experience outside of them. Consider how strange it is that in modern teenage movies they not only show up, but that, in 2017, remain virtually unchanged, despite the fact that the teenage experience around them is completely different. At this point, their avoidance feels not like an oversight, but like a deliberate, tactical decision. Every time the movie felt like it was about to reveal its grand trick, every time I thought the friends James made would show that they only really stayed in his company out of some cruel sense of irony, that he was going to be tragically misunderstood in some terrible way, I was proven wrong. After a while, I stopped waiting for things to go bad. Brigsby Bear is just a better movie than that. It doesn't have time for those kinds of things because it has bigger things on its mind. What exactly? Well, let's talk about it, but know that for this last section of the video, I will be talking much more heavy spoilers. Okay, so, in many ways, the movie is about moving on from our childhood pleasantries, about nostalgia culture in the media in general, and how we all eventually have to leave it behind. Throughout most of the movie, James is obsessed with something that brought him joy as a child. He says several times it was one of the few things that made him happy. He was never allowed to experience the art of the outside world, and thus his taste was never really allowed to develop. When he sees another movie, he enjoys it, but it's not Brigsby. When he sees a Star Trek ship, he views it through a Brigsby lens. It's all he can talk about. It's the primary way through which he views the world. And though he loves it, in order to develop as a person, he has to put it to rest. James might not realise it, the adults in his life certainly don't, but by finishing his Brigsby Bear movie, he's essentially putting that part of him behind him. He's allowing the story to finish, and maybe his obsession as well. If the movie has an ending, he can move on. Also of note is that I like how, in order to do that, he needs to confront the man he called his father. It makes sense that the only way James can move on from Brigsby and the person his entrapment made him is by deviating from the foundations and worldview his father previously set in stone. This character is, by the way, played perfectly by Mark Hamill. Despite his cruel and outright destructive actions, his love for James is genuine and apparent in every scene he's in, coming across as more pitiable than villainous. There's a reason James's movie ends with the destruction of the Brigsby Bear universe, and it's the same reason James sees Brigsby teleport away in the real world, not coincidentally after being hugged by his new friends. And there's a reason there's no knowing, winking line from the gang about working on a part 2. He doesn't even end up calling the film Brigsby Bear the movie, he calls it the Brigsby Bear movie I made with my friends. Because by the time the movie has finished, he's already found a more worthwhile thing to dedicate his time to. Retroactively aggrandizing and replicating a previous generation's culture is nothing new. In fact, many would say reinterpretations of foundational artwork is the only way to forge anything original. In cinema though, which is, yes, still a young art form, reinterpretation can often be a less popular alternative to excited emulation, which is understandable. There's nothing wrong with wanting to revisit what made movies and art magic to us to begin with, but ignoring the time between and how the medium has progressed, and just pasting the original onto the current zeitgeist, you can end up with a facsimile of something you love, something easily forgotten that the talented people that worked on them, and fans alike, could have done without. Brigsby Bear, even with its message of let things end and move on, never feels like it sets out with nostalgia culture explicitly in its crosshairs. Rather, it feels like a poignant treatise on them. If I'm reaching, and I apologise for that, but there's something sweet about James putting to rest the thing he cares the most about. In the final scenes, as it's been throughout, the movie is hopeful, without a shred of pessimism in its DNA, looking towards the future. I've been Will, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment and subscribe. I haven't decided what we're going to be talking about next, so stay tuned. Thanks again.